50% of all cancers are preventable, and one of the best ways to reduce your risk of developing cancer is to change the foods you consume every day. There are 4 major categories of food that directly feed cancer cells. And in this video, I'm going to show you which of these 4 categories to avoid, as well as the simple nutritional framework I give my own patients to starve cancer cells, boost immunity, and reduce inflammation. Our modern diet has a huge problem that directly impacts how cancer grows. For a cancer cell to survive, grow, and spread, it needs 4 things: fuel, usually in the form of glucose; chronic inflammation; certain growth signals like insulin and IGF-1; and a blood supply, also known as angiogenesis. Many staples of the modern diet promote every stage of this cancer growth process. Most people worry about sugar, red meat, or pesticides. But one of the most harmful food categories that directly feeds cancer cells is hidden in foods that people think are healthy. This category is ultra-processed emulsifiers. These emulsifiers are added to foods to make them creamier, and you will find them literally everywhere. They are found in protein bars, plant-based milks, ice creams, coffee creamers, gluten-free products, bottled dressings, and even in some yogurts and high-protein snacks. Here's why it matters. 2 specific emulsifiers, polysorbate 80 and carboxymethyl cellulose, CMC, have repeatedly been shown to trigger inflammation, disrupt the gut barrier, and increase tumor formation in animal models. This is where things get interesting. The intestinal wall is supposed to be tight, protected, selective, and airtight. These emulsifiers dissolve the mucus, that thin protective layer in the gut, and allow bacteria and other byproducts to get too close to immune cells. This ultimately leads to low-grade chronic inflammation, metabolic changes, and alterations in the gut microbiome. All these elements together create an environment that cancer loves. In other words, emulsifiers don't directly cause cancer, but they create the conditions in which cancer cells thrive by causing chronic inflammation. If cancer is a spark that starts a fire, emulsifiers help dry out the forest. So, here are some tips to reduce your exposure to emulsifiers. The first thing is to read food labels and watch for these specific names: polysorbate 80, polysorbate 60, carboxymethyl cellulose, cellulose gum, carrageenan, as well as mono and diglycerides. If you see any of these ingredients, it's time to put that product back on the shelf. Secondly, choose simple alternatives like oat milk or almond milk that contain only 3 to 5 ingredients in total. Prefer fresh cream or light cream over artificial creamers. Make your own homemade dressing instead of buying bottled dressings, and choose protein bars with ingredients you can actually pronounce. The third tip is what I like to call the grandmother rule. I don't know about you, but if your grandmother was an excellent cook, she probably knew a good number of ingredients. So, if your grandmother wouldn't recognize an ingredient on the back of a food label, your gut probably won't recognize it either. Honestly, this one rule alone significantly reduces inflammation, and inflammation is the primary driver that cancer cells use to grow. The problem with our modern food system is that food can be contaminated long before it reaches your plate. And one of the most potent natural carcinogens we have ever discovered comes from something most people don't even think about. It is a specific fungal toxin called aflatoxin. Aflatoxins form when certain crops are stored in warm, humid conditions, especially when moisture is not properly controlled. These aflatoxins tend to appear in peanuts, pistachios, almonds, walnuts, corn, and grains. Not because these foods are bad, but because they are vulnerable to mold growth during the storage and transport process. Here is where many people are misled. The nuts themselves do not cause cancer. I want to repeat that because it's important. The nuts themselves do not cause cancer. It is the contamination of the nuts that is the problem. Contamination becomes more likely when you are dealing with imported nut mixes, nuts bought in bulk, nut butters like almond butter from lower quality suppliers, and grains stored without proper temperature control. Aflatoxins are harmful because they directly damage your DNA and overwhelm your liver's detoxification pathway. This is why long-term exposure particularly increases your risk of liver cancer. But the key here is exposure, not total avoidance. It's not about completely eliminating nuts. It's about choosing the right fresh, clean, and properly preserved nuts. Buy your nuts from reputable companies that source from dry climates. You can also store your nuts in the refrigerator or freezer and really try to use them within a month of opening the bag. You can also roast them if you prefer, but that doesn't completely reduce your exposure to aflatoxins, even if it mitigates it a little. One of the biggest problems with our modern diet is how truly loaded it is with carbohydrates. And the problem with a lot of carbs, especially in large quantities at once, is that they are directly transformed into sugar. And this matters because cancer cells don't just like sugar. They depend on it. And it's not just table sugar. It's the glucose your body creates from common foods like bread, pasta, cereal, pastries, sodas and sugary drinks, fruit juices, and candy. This is linked to something called the Warburg effect, where cancer cells burn sugar quickly even when oxygen is available. Glucose essentially becomes the default fuel for cancer cells. Think of it this way. Most cells in our body create energy as if they were stacking Legos. The cells receive signals from the body and stack the Legos carefully in order. Once the Lego construction is finished, the cells stop stacking the Legos. Cancer cells also create energy like Legos, but they stack them in various orders, creating something chaotic and completely different from what it's supposed to be. This messy stacking only happens when cancer cells receive sugar. And here is where things become even more concerning. Sugar doesn't just feed cancer cells. It increases the hormones or signals that tell these cells to keep growing. These hormones, like insulin and IGF-1, act as growth accelerators. To go back to our Lego analogy, sugar makes cancer cells stack the Legos out of order. Then, sugar increases insulin and IGF-1, which commands the cells to keep stacking Legos out of order over and over again. This creates a massive Lego tower that the body cannot get rid of, and congratulations, you now have a tumor. Some cancer cells, notably breast cancer cells, are known to have up to 6 times more insulin receptors than normal cells in the body. Cancer is literally programmed to run on this system. This means a diet high in sugar sends more powerful growth signals directly to cancer cells rather than to healthy cells. But the good news is that you don't have to completely eliminate carbohydrates. It's about choosing the right carbs that don't feed these cancer cells. You want to replace high glycemic index carbohydrates with low glycemic index carbohydrates. This means replacing white bread with whole grain or sprouted bread. Instead of pasta, opt for chickpeas, lentils, or quinoa. For sugary cereals, use oats, and instead of pastries, choose Greek yogurt and berries. In general, try to reduce added sugars as much as possible. This means limiting pastries, cookies, sodas, and other sugary drinks like sweet tea and energy drinks. Choose whole food carbohydrates that contain fiber and are therefore digested a little more slowly. Think of berries, beans, and quinoa. For all the soda lovers, replace them with unsweetened tea, sparkling water, or even diet soda if necessary. The bottom line is this. You don't have to give up all your carbs. You just have to choose the ones that nourish you, and not the cancer cells. One of the biggest misconceptions I encounter all the time is that moderate alcohol consumption is considered safe. But from an oncological perspective, alcohol has been classified as a Group 1 carcinogen. That's the same category as tobacco and asbestos. This doesn't mean that alcohol is equivalent to smoking, but it means there is a clear and established link between alcohol consumption and cancer. Even small amounts of alcohol increase the risk of colon, breast, liver, and esophageal cancer. The main reason is that when alcohol is metabolized by the body, it turns into acetaldehyde, a chemical that directly damages DNA and causes inflammation. Alcohol also interferes with DNA repair, depletes essential nutrients like B vitamins, disrupts hormonal balance, and acts as a solvent, making other carcinogens more harmful to your tissues. In other words, alcohol doesn't just cause damage, It makes your body more vulnerable to other sources of damage as well. And yes, even just one drink a day has been shown to increase the risk of certain cancers, especially breast cancer. But it's not about perfection, guilt, or never drinking again. It's about understanding this truth. When it comes to cancer, the less you drink, the better. A simple change like reducing from 8 drinks a week to even 4 drinks a week makes a huge difference in your overall cancer risk. If you don't remember everything we talked about in this video today, that's perfectly normal. I've gathered all the important points and everything you need to know in my anti-cancer food guide, and you can get a free copy using the link in the description. The heart of the prudent acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. This is an excerpt from the book of Proverbs 18:15. If this video has opened your eyes to how common everyday foods can increase your cancer risk, you might want to look at the common medications that silently increase your risk of dementia, presented by Dr. Ben. I highly recommend watching that video.